I was 11 years old and I started sixth grade. And I had some friends, not many, but none of them were in any classes with me. They had all been separated. And everyone in the classes I did have hated me. And I know what you're thinking. Now, a lot of people feel that way, especially starting middle school or something like that. But when you're 11 years old, that's how you feel. You feel like you're the only one that everybody hates. You're the only one that feels this way. And starting middle school, we were able to have full access to the library pretty much anytime. Like at lunch, you could just go to the library. And so I went and they had a graphic novel section, paperbacks and hardcovers and different comics. And I thought it was crazy. I'd never seen a comic book in a library. I didn't think that was a thing. But there it was. And I saw this comic, and it was called Ultimate Spider-Man. And I had been a Spider-Man fan. I'd seen the first movie with Tobey Maguire a few years prior to that. And the Spider-Man 2 I had even seen the summer before starting middle school. So I was really excited to read a Spider-Man comic. I hadn't read any yet. And I picked this book up and I started reading it. And all of a sudden I felt this connection to the character I had never felt before. I knew he was an outcast. I knew he was a loner. But it always felt dated or different, like it was just a character I was looking at, not a real person. But this comic made it feel like a real person, and it changed my life. And talking about this comic now it's going to bring up a lot of memories, but I think it's something that I need to do.
Yeah, I do. I didn't read this book till like a month ago, but I do like it, and I do want to talk about it with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk about it, but first, I'm Tank.
I'm Nicky, and you are watching the first of KNC Productions' arc by arc retrospective of Bendis and Bagley's Ultimate Spider Man. Thank you for joining us.
You're watching KNC on Comics.
So yeah, welcome guys to the video. We've given you a little bit of our background with the series. Tank here has had it as part of his DNA pretty much his whole life. Lifelong Spider fan, yeah. Like
Oh yeah,
him, Batman, and Daredevil, if I'm not mistaken, are your guys.
pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a Green Lantern kid. I mostly read comics in high school. Took a break, back now, and a big reason that I'm back in is Marvel's current Ultimate line. And the biggest book on shelves, not that series is one thing. I'd say the biggest comic in the world right now is John Hickman's Ultimate Spider-Man, and
I'd have to agree.
I mean, it's huge. And when I came back into comics, John Hickman, as you know, Tank, was kind of my way in. So I read the Spider book, and it got me thinking about older Spider books I love, like Superior Spider Man. But this Ultimate line, this new series that Marvel has started up, is not without precedent. A lot of people will hear Ultimate Spider Man and think Miles Morales. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
I think to a lot of especially modern readers, that's Ultimate Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And that's what I had expected when I dove into this, because Tank had been telling me, read this book, it's one of the best runs. So I'm expecting Miles, and what I get is a classic Spider Man meat and potatoes from the Jump story. So, Tank, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how the Ultimate line started and where we got to this point.
Yeah. So the publisher at the time of Marvel felt that the Marvel universe, with at that point 40 years of
Mm-hmm.
backstory, was just nobody could get into it,
It's
right?
ungainly.
He wanted people to be able to pick up a book and start reading it and instantly understand these characters. Um, and so he wanted to reboot it, starting with Spider-Man, which was Marvel's flagship character. It was their biggest character, no question. Okay, still, really, it's still their highest selling character.
Biggest character in comics,
And
I'd say.
yeah,
Arguably.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely make that argument. I mean, there the big three is always
Yeah.
going to be a debate, right?
Yeah.
Superman, Batman, Spider Man. Those are the big three. That's where the argument's always going to be. Who is the most number one? And it fluctuates. Sometimes it's Spider Man, sometimes it's Batman. This summer, we may be seeing a change.
Hope so.
You know, but well, we'll see with that. But definitely, it's a debate because they're the big three. Those are
Yep.
the big three. Um, and so initially, the editor in chief at the time, Joe Quesada,
Hmm.
he was a little hesitant, right? He wasn't sure, and one of the reasons is because a couple of years before they had tried to
Hmm.
reboot Spider-Man. It was a comic called Spider-Man Chapter One, and it was basically a retelling of Amazing 15 with some very lazy updating. Like instead
Hmm.
of a microscope, he gets a computer, But essentially, the dialogue was almost identical, and everything was almost identical, and it just wasn't. There wasn't enough effort clearly put into it, and but they tasked Brian Michael Bendis with rebooting Spider-Man essentially,
An indie comic
and
guy at the time, we should say.
yeah, an indie comic guy. He had worked on a series called Powers,
Hmm.
and he had worked for Todd McFarlane's Spawn line, actually, writing a comic called Sam and Twitch, which are detectives in the Spawn universe.
Hmm.
And they had their own series, and he had written some for Todd McFarlane. And so Bendis had gotten his feet wet, definitely in the industry at this point, but he wasn't writing any mainstream characters at all. I mean, we're talking about indie comics and an Image comic. The that was the closest thing to a big name character that he had gotten. So
Just to give
this
a
was a
little,
real
oh, excuse me, just to give a little more gravity to him being brought on to do this, it's not the case nowadays where publishers and comic houses are obsessed with pushing out new issue ones, right? Like every time a writer changes up or a control of a comic switches hands, you get a new issue one. And they kind of have
yeah
this intense drive to provide new jumping on points for people. But at the time that Ultimate Spider Man happened, Tank, you can attest to this. A number one for a character like Spider Man was kind of a rare
yeah
thing. They were much more
yeah
interested in that legacy numbering and building up into the hundreds, right?
yeah. I'm not exactly sure where Amazing was at this point, but I
I
think
don't know either.
we're 400, approaching 500,
Mm-hmm.
if
Gotta
not
be.
already there at this point. So I remember McFarlane wrote 300 or drew 300.
Yes, we were well past
So,
that.
and that was we're a decade or more, over a decade past that because that was in the 80s. Um, and this is the 99 when this is being planned. So they're they're taking a huge risk here.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking their most popular character and an indie guy who has never written anything like this before and saying, look, you take our flagship character, you take our baby, our moneymaker,
Mm-hmm.
and you reinvent him in a way that old fans can enjoy and new fans can be introduced. That's a monumental task for an experienced Spider-Man writer,
Yeah.
for an experienced comic book writer. That's a monumental task for anybody.
Especially because this book kind of became the blueprint for doing this kind of idea moving forward. Let's
Yeah,
update it.
this
Let's
is
bring
the
them
first
in.
book. This isn't just, oh, we're just doing Spider-Man. We're rebooting the entire Marvel universe. We're doing a new version of everything. This is our first one with
Mm-hmm.
our big character. It has to work. This book has to work. And Bendis writes it, and in September 2000, this hits the shelves.
Beautiful.
Ultimate Spider-Man #1.
So, as you said, of kind of paramount importance here was nailing the vibe, right? You said the
Yeah,
earlier attempt at kind of bringing back Spider Man's origin didn't really fly. It felt too old. It felt too similar to a book that could have come out in 1960s. So, how exactly does he go about, he being Bendis, go about modernizing this while keeping the DNA of the character? And I think that's the first real thing that we want to jump into with this. What
yeah.
about Ultimate Spider Man for you, Tank? I'm curious makes it so of its time? And do you think By the way, we're talking about here in this video just the opening arc, which is how
Yeah,
7 issues?
7 issues, I believe.
7 issues.
Powerless.
So you're
Uh,
getting
I,
seven
well, the first
issues
issue is called Powerless. The arc, I believe, is Power and
Power
Responsibility.
and Responsibility. This is a huge departure from the way that Spider-Man had been packaged and presented before, because his initial appearance is how long? His origin story is about 15 pages, right? So
11 pages.
11 pages. You are getting now multiple times that, right? This dude's taking his time. He's setting it up. He's going over all of these little minute banal details of his day-to-day life. How does this work for you?
It works phenomenally. I mean, that's the thing. That's what Bendis does to make it work is he just does what he does, right?
Mhm.
He slows it down. He doesn't blurt it all out. I mean, this is you would think that he would go, "Oh, there's this big character. I've got to do something different from what I normally do." He doesn't do that. He goes, "I'm going to do what I normally do. I'm going to write dialogue. I'm going to write realistic people. I'm going to write people. It's a comic book about teenagers in the
Mhm.
2000s. They're going to feel like teenagers in the 2000s. And when I first read the book, that's exactly what I felt like I was reading. I felt like I
Mhm.
was reading people I knew, people I had seen or spoken to before. I'm 11 years old. These characters sound like people I know. They sound like people like when Peter, I believe the beginning of the issue, Peter's at the mall, right? The food court.
Yes. Where
And
they spend a lot of time in that food court, man.
yeah,
And it's
they
not
spend,
nothing. There are big moments that happen later on in that food court, but he dedicates a wild amount of time to just the teens sitting and grabbing a burger and being worried about
exactly.
fitting into their like swimsuit or the outfit that they bought for a party.
Yeah, I think there's even like a panel where it's like, oh, I'm so totally grounded. No,
Yeah.
really, are you grounded? They're just talking about their lives, but it feels authentic. Peter is immediately placed in this world
Hmm.
that you can identify and you can feel,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it work. That's what Bendis's writing does. He doesn't try to fit into this. He makes it fit into him, and it works beautifully. I mean, and that was part of the problem with the previous attempt is that it's this dated version of way of telling stories, but that they just try to throw in some newer stuff. But I mean, he's still dressed like a teenager in 1963 or whatever.
There's a lack of
No,
fidelity.
lack of fidelity. Peter in Ultimate Spider-Man #1, he's wearing a T-shirt, he's wearing jeans, he's
Yeah.
wearing sneakers, stuff the teenagers weren't wearing in the early
Got a
1960s.
haircut that looks kind of like yours, to be frank.
Yeah, I got a little bit
He's
of
got
Elizabeth
the
Peter going on in my hair.
yeah,
Yeah,
you do.
he's got what is then a very modern haircut. It's looks a lot like the Backstreet Boys or
Hmm.
something. And he's wearing he's wearing these thin framed glasses that were really popular in the early 2000s. Not the thick, very nerdy Revenge of the Nerds looking frame that
Clark
Peter
Kent.
has in the OG comics.
Yeah. I want
Peter
to
looks
say
like a teenager from 2000.
he does. He looks like one, he talks like one, walks like one. And that's something I'm glad that you said when you were reading this. You looked around people that were around you. You were like, "Yeah, that these are the people I'm reading in my book. This is exactly what, life is like right now." I was kind of trepidatious going into this because this book does have a big reputation. It's discussed. It's a canonical work. We both love it. I was a little bit worried that I'd heard that it was dated, that it was very early 2000s and that the setup was very dialogue heavy and slow moving. As someone who hit this for the first time in 2025, it still feels honest and authentic.
Yeah,
I don't think that the dialogue puts a date on it the way that some people have claimed. That'd be like saying you can't watch a film from the 2000s, like early 2000s, because people are talking like they're in the early 2000s. No, you just take that as a source of fidelity, and it's entertaining and it's natural and it's real. And
yeah,
I think because of modern day Bendis gets flack in his like current writings about how talky he is, about how much he puts that real life element into everything he writes. For this book, it is a breath of fresh air, and it's honest.
yeah.
You know,
I agree. It is. It's very honest. And
how do you
I
think?
think. Yeah.
How do you think Bagley's
Sorry, go
art?
ahead.
How do you think Bagley's art works in that early 2000s way too?
It's funny you said. I was just so Bagley's art because of that design, right? That update. You know, the way Peter looks, the way that Mary Jane looks
Mm,
in the comic.
great
I mean,
design.
she looks like a 2000s teenager. She's
Everyone wears
wearing
the crop top
things,
and the bell bottoms.
the crop tops and the baggy, and also there's another issue. She's wearing these like pink flip flops with a flower on them, and
Mm.
I remember those at that time being really popular. People like wearing that kind of thing, and
Lizzie McGuire
she's
fashion.
yeah, that Lizzie McGuire look, right? I mean, that's
Or the Olsons.
almost exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm. It's
She's
perfect.
got and one issue she's got overalls, like denim overalls
Mm-hmm.
with like a t-shirt, and one of the overall snaps is like loose. That was a huge thing at that time.
If
I mean, the fashion feels current, and Bagley is tapping into that as well. He and Bendis are working almost symbiotically
yeah,
in these issues where it's like he just knows this is what Bendis is going for. I know how to draw that. I can make that happen. And Bagley had drawn Spider-Man before,
mm-hmm.
but this was the first time that Bagley was drawing his Spider-Man,
Mm.
right? He wasn't having to copy a house style or add little tweaks to something that other people were doing. He was able to fully do it, and the way he draws Spider-Man shows that as well. He looks like a teenager. He's got big hands and a big head and a skinny body, and it
Wayfishly thin
feels
almost. Sharp,
yeah,
angular, jutting rib cages and knees and elbow.
yes.
You feel the points of his elbows a lot of the times in the illustrations.
Yeah, his knees. You can see like his knees and all, and it feels like a like a teenager. He
Yeah.
looks like a teenager. He feels like a teenager. He is a teenager.
He
He
works like
feels
that
like a
in
real
combat.
teenager.
Combat as well when he's fighting. He's zipping in and
Yeah,
out of people, he's finding openings. He's using that adolescence and the litheness of his body.
yeah.
It's like you
And
said,
until
symbiotic.
you know he is figuring it out too,
Hmm.
right? Because in the last issue of this arc, of this first arc, he's fighting the first appearance of what we will later realize to be the Green Goblin.
Scariest, one
Um,
of the scariest villains in comics. Full stop.
yeah, and again, future video we're going to definitely tackle
Hmm.
this, but he's fighting him and he's saying, "Why am I making jokes? I guess it's either that or pee my pants in every fight."
Hmm.
And he's saying that because, like, it's a coping mechanism. That's what he is. That's why Spider-Man, this essential thing about Spider-Man that we all accept, right? That Spider-Man makes jokes and cracks jokes while he's fighting villains.
Yep.
Okay, Bendis goes, I'm going to give a reason for that, a real reason for it, a psychological thing. He's a kid. He's scared to death. This is a coping mechanism. That's why he's doing it. And
It's still camp. It's still
yeah,
goofy. It's still very comic booky, but especially, I mean, in this arc for sure, but at a lot of points you can feel it masking the fear or the dread, which is something that he contends with a lot more in this book than any
yeah,
Spider-Man book I've read, is oppressive anxiety, right?
yeah.
And the joking
Real
makes
fear.
sense. So
Yeah, real fear.
you had said something that I kind of want to build on, which is that in this arc, and we should talk a little bit in these first 7 issues about what the actual story is, right? Maybe what's the same, what's different. But you had talked about he's growing and he's learning things.
Yeah,
We start with Peter as he is in the original introduction of Spider-Man being kind of a jerk, kind of,
a little bit.
off to this, a willful outcast, right? Someone who is not a part of the in crowd, and he's kind of taken that to a point not of like pride or arrogance, but he's looking down his nose at these people that he can't fit in with, right? What to you, as you're reading this first arc, are some of the skills that he's learning or ways that he's growing that stand out to you?
Well, I think the important thing is it before he learns anything, he has to get worse,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Good
So
point.
he gets bit. He gets bit by a spider, right? And he discovers he has these powers. And much like the original, the first thing he goes, "Oh, I'm going to make some money with this." He goes into pro wrestling in that
Yes.
first arc. and we're both pro wrestling
Massive
fans.
pro wrestling fans here.
Something we can relate to, right? If
Yeah.
all of a sudden we could do this, these amazing physical feats, would we go, yeah, let's do this, be pro wrestlers, dude?
We'd be hitting the bingo
And
halls like 5 minutes into having powers,
yeah,
just hitting people with destroyers and like snapdragons.
exactly.
Yeah.
We would be like, we're going to be on Dynamite in a year, bro. Like, that would be our goal.
Please, TK.
And, and that's exactly what he does, right? He
Yeah.
goes into pro wrestling, he wants to make money, and immediately it's like, yeah, that's the thing that's in the original, but it's taken a step further here. He's not just making money, he becomes a real prick about it.
Hmm.
Like,
And
all
you
of a
get to see
sudden,
the people around him as well.
yeah,
Like the booker that he's working with, the promoter. Talk about a real prick, right? Peter is for sure one,
yeah,
but these guys are slippery. They're shady. You're starting to see.
yeah,
You're getting a sense of New York already as like,
yeah,
if you don't watch your back, man, these people are going to take you for what they can, right?
absolutely. But in doing so, in this arrogance, right, it affects his relationship with his uncle, with his aunt. He gets into a fight, which they replicated in the first Spider-Man movie with
Yep.
Tobey Maguire, the Flash Thompson fight. He shatters his arm,
Mm-hmm.
right? Catches a punch, breaks his arm. It financially harms his aunt and uncle. They had this moment of like, what's wrong with you? This isn't how you behave. This isn't how we've taught you to behave. He immediately flips out on him and runs off. Right?
Yes, and Ben and May are very different in this as well. So when they're having these
Yeah,
conversations, it carries a lot more gravity. Uncle Ben is someone that you barely see in
yeah. In Amazing
Amazing.
15, in any of the early Spider-Man comics, when you do see Ben, it's just, he loved Peter and he thought there was nothing like him, and
Hmm.
that's all there was to their relationship. And that worked for readers at the time.
Sure.
All they needed to know were these basic facts. But we were reaching a point where we wanted to really dive in psychologically to these characters and see how they tick. And Bendis understands that, and so he gives us an Uncle Ben and an Aunt May that we care about,
They are
that
both.
feel like authentic people,
They are
complex
full
human
people,
beings.
living, breathing, man.
Yeah,
Even after Ben bites it, he's there with you the whole run.
and when Ben bites it, you feel that.
Yeah.
It's not like, even if you know it's coming, and you know it's coming the whole time,
Yeah,
because
it's Spider
this,
Man.
before it happens, you become attached to him
Hmm.
anyway. And when he does die, you feel Peter's anguish and his pain. And that's when the lessons really start
Yep.
for the character, right? Because he's going through this and he decides, oh, you know what? I'm being a prick. I'm going to head home.
Hmm.
I'm going to head home. I'm going to apologize to Aunt May and Uncle Ben. They don't deserve this. And it gets there and it's too late. It's too late to say he's sorry.
And
It's,
it's not just a name when it's too late. Because of the time that we spend, because of the fact that
yeah,
this is 7 issues and not 11 pages, it's not just a chalk outline. It's the guy with the ponytail who's joking at Aunt May with Peter. He's the guy
yeah,
that is his father's brother, right? That's a thing. Richard Parker has a presence in this, and that isn't the case
yeah,
in traditional Spider-Man comics. So this is a family member. This is a dude that again he wears his hair a certain way, and that gives you more than you think it would, right? You spend these little
yeah,
moments, and their house is a home. And when
yeah,
he's gone from it, and let's say too, it's a house that they make a point of they shouldn't have moved in. They didn't have the money to move in. May wanted to. Even the house itself becomes a
yeah,
tomb, right? Their family home becomes this dreadful, unfortunate tomb.
yeah. And that's something that they continue to address throughout the series,
Yeah.
too. And
Everything here
Bendis
gets
really
built on.
masterfully handles it.
Mm-hmm. It all feels purposeful, don't you think? Like,
It does. It does. It really does. And I think one of the things that really struck me is I think we've all had that last conversation with someone that we wish we hadn't, and then they're gone,
yep.
and all of a sudden you can't take those words back. You can't fix it. You know, the last thing that Peter says to his uncle is like, you know, if my dad was so smart, then where the F is he? Right? That's what he says to him. And and you know, and then Ben's dead, and there's nothing that he can say to him. He can't apologize. He can't take it back. Nothing that he says or does. And again, that moment in the original that readers understood so well that Peter could have stopped the guy that shot Ben.
Mm-hmm.
When it happens here, it's even more impactful
Mm.
because that moment's longer, right? It's a different moment, right? Originally, he was robbing the TV station or whatever that they weren't going to pay him, and you know, he lets. But in this one, he's just being selfish, just fully selfish.
Yep.
You know, the guy that gets robbed didn't do anything to Peter. There's no reason for Peter not to try to help him, but he doesn't.
It's
And he
arrogance.
doesn't because he's angry at everybody else. He's angry at the world,
Yep.
and he says, "Why should I bother with anyone? No one's ever bothered with me." And later, when he finds that guy, when he sees that face and realizes his role to play,
Mm-hmm.
it brings it all home. And that power and responsibility, that line, that with great power must come great responsibility, it's not just a line anymore. It's something that is a core thing to the character now.
Well, and it's something too. Bendis, with all of his writing, his beauty, like you said, him and Bagley have this weird relationship where Bagley can like show anything, and it almost seems like these guys are sharing a brain. When he makes this connection, and I believe that it is in the issue 7, it's I remember it very well. It's the moment that the series really locked in with me, and I was like, "Oh, this is a big deal." There's this splash page. You know what I'm talking about? This collage where he sees the man that he could be. There are like 5 different illustrations of Spider-Man stopping crimes. This is before he has the full suit, before he goes street level. Is that in issue 7 or am I tripping?
It's because remember, issue 7 is the fight at the school.
Oh, so it's 5 or 6 then, right?
It's like 5 or 6 but yes, exactly.
You
That's a great splash
he
page, right?
sees the man that he's going to become, and you get almost like these little vignettes of things yet to happen, but it's this
Yeah,
moment that he understands what Ben was trying to say to him, and in that moment his destiny is locked in. And whatever would
exactly.
happen with this man, when he makes that connection to Ben, and I want to go brief tangent if you'll indulge me. There's this very famous, one of the most beloved moments in comics is the death of Johnny Storm in John Hickman's Fantastic Four. And
Yeah,
Franklin Richards, all powerful son of Reed, has the ability to save Johnny, kind of, but he doesn't really know how to use his powers. It's complicated. After the Human Torch's passing, Peter Parker goes and finds Franklin and has a talk with him. And Franklin, at the end of the talk, says, "Can I confess something to you? Uh, I think I could have saved my uncle." And Peter says, "Okay, can I tell you something? I know I could have saved mine." And it is
yeah,
this human connection, this beautiful moment. Now, when I read that, I think of this Ultimate Spider Man rendition of that
yeah.
relationship. And I would be shocked if Hickman wasn't as well. This immediately supplants itself as the end all be all depiction of this man and his nephew to me.
Yeah, it honestly is. And I think that's also talking about Ben and talking about May, the supporting cast
Unreal.
of Ultimate Spider-Man. What's introduced in this first arc?
Yeah.
Okay, obviously we've already talked about May and Ben. Those two
Well,
have
just
been
to
introduced.
just to touch on May, because we didn't say much on her.
We
she's
didn't.
she's a full person too. You know,
Yeah,
she's the heart of this series, and that starts here.
yeah, and again, as the series goes on, we learn more about her
Hmm.
as a human being, as a person, and who she is.
She goes to wine tasting
And
classes,
yeah,
and that's like a subplot for a bit.
yeah, it's great. Um, but yeah, May is a real person, and
Hmm.
she's a person who has real love for Peter, and you feel that love in the
Complicated
issues.
love,
Complicated
not
love,
easy,
yeah,
not always selfless either.
no, And again, when you see these moments of Peter being selfish,
Mm-hmm.
you see Peter being early before he has this hard lesson.
Mm-hmm.
You see her really struggling with it,
Yep.
and then when Ben dies, that what are we going to do, Peter? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
That's a human moment. That's like something that logically, why would you ask this 15-year-old kid what we're going to do?
Because she don't have
But
the
in that
answers.
moment, she doesn't have anybody else to ask. She
Yeah.
doesn't have anybody else to turn to. This is her only family, and she's asking him, what are we going to do? She's voicing this real anguish that
Mm-hmm.
she's feeling. And then when you get to some of the other supporting cast, Mary Jane, the new Mary Jane is a great character. She's
She's phenomenal.
in some ways a 180 from the original 616
Yeah.
Mary Jane, right? She's not this super popular girl, this supermodel. She's a beautiful girl, but she's
Yeah,
nerdy.
she's
She's
well
just as brainy as Peter.
she's well liked, but even the people that go
Yeah,
on to have like real affinity for her later in the series, it's like a dude with a rock band who's kind of like grungy and outside of stuff. Like the
yeah,
popular kids in this book don't really give a lot of leeway to, or not a lot of leeway. They don't have a lot of favor for her. Like when Gwen shows up, it's game over. Again, that's way in the future. But
yeah,
MJ, like you're saying, she's a recluse too. She's not this. Well, she's another person like Peter who doesn't have a lot in the world. Her
yeah,
her relationship with her father may as well be non-existent. She has a helicopter mom who is dealing with the same trauma that she is, right? Which is this abusive X factor in the house of the
yeah.
father.
Which again, as the comic goes on, they really dig into
Yeah.
that.
I like though that from the jump here, she needs him as much as he needs her.
Yeah,
And with
and that
this, a similar thing with Harry too. We'll get to in a second. They all want him doing their homework, so that's a
yeah,
big part of it. They
yeah,
all want they
Harry.
all want to be his lab partner.
Yeah, Harry
Hmm.
is introduced in this series, and again, he's a friend to MJ and Peter, but he's also using them,
Yeah,
right? He's saying, "Oh,
no
you're not
question.
doing the homework," and he's like, "Yeah, they shouldn't mess with you," and I've told them to ease off, but you may just have to grin and bear it. He's not willing to risk his status.
He has all the opportunity in the world to say something to Flash and to Kong, who are two of our
Yeah,
other main characters that we get introduced here. Kind of prototypical high school bully as far as Flash goes. Kong's similar, but he's too dumb to be unkind, and he kind of has a nice thing. But Harry could, like you said, Harry could call them off at any point, but he
he
doesn't.
could. And again, and they do address, and Harry does address that ability at a later time.
Hmm.
And we'll get into that when we get into that arc, the fourth arc, I believe.
Yes.
But at this moment, Harry's using them, and it's not exactly hidden. But then during this arc, Harry himself experiences some real trauma.
Yeah.
He watches his mother burn to death in front of him. He watches his father experiment on himself in this
His
horrific
father.
moment, and a moment that's censored too, which is brilliant when you
Hmm.
think about it. You see the look on Harry's face, and then you see a panel with just with a Spider-Man's like logo right there, and like it censors it. You don't get to see it. You don't get to find out what happens in that panel for like 100 issues almost
Well, you and I
before
are
you actually
also
see it happen.
we're both students of the horror film. Tank and I both have a great affinity for horror films. What's the golden rule of horror, man? Whatever your mind can make up is going to be scarier than what you could put on the page or on the screen. So you're
Yeah.
like, oh my god.
How bad
Yeah.
was this, right?
Yeah.
And when you see that panel, I remember being a kid and reading that and being like, what? Like, what just happened
Hmm.
there? It's just like, and I like immediately some of the worst scenarios I could think of. And that, and then you see the aftermath, right? You see the wreckage, and you see a person like impaled with a pipe and blood, and you don't see what happened. You can imagine it's not good.
It's not good, and
And
it's immediately not a kid's book. It,
yeah,
it sets the tone pretty early in this run. There is some stuff later on in this book that is unbelievably haunting. You don't have to wait It's pretty it's effed up from the jump here, Ultimate
Yeah,
Spider-Man. I want to
it's not.
establish something real quick just cuz we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about Harry as we go. I just want to say I have, you know, competent reading skills. I read this and I'm not sure what he gets from them. I agree with you that he's using them. I still can't put my finger on what exactly they mean to him. I know what his relationship with his dad is, but he's so slippery as a character. He's so hard to pin down. Especially in these early chapters, you never really know what he's getting from these relationships.
Yeah,
He's
until later.
until
Yeah,
later. And even then I still harbor doubts about what he really cares about or doesn't. But he's immediately a very interesting foil to Peter.
yeah, yeah. Harry really is, and again, one arc in particular that we will get to.
Your favorite, I believe.
Yeah, it is. It's all about Harry and Peter's friendship and what it is.
It's messed up.
And yeah, it is very messed
It's
up.
messed up.
Um, but yeah, so we've got Harry,
Mm-hmm.
we've got Mary Jane, we've got May, we've got Ben,
Mm-hmm.
Flash, and Kong.
Yeah.
Super fascinating characters. Kong is, in many ways, Kong takes the place of the OG Flash Thompson.
Yeah. Reading
In that
Kong.
Kong,
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry,
I was just gonna say reading Kong for like the first 30, 40 issues of this book. Kong was my favorite thing.
yeah.
I love this character. So yeah, please explain him.
So Kong is the bully who was a fan of Spider-Man,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what Flash was in the comics forever, you know. The irony was that he hated Peter Parker, but he loved Spider-Man, and he had no clue that they were the same person. And Kong has that, as we'll talk about more, they dive into it in much more interesting
He
ways.
gets a couple big
But
spotlights.
yeah, but Kong here, he's not the brightest bulb.
Mm-mm.
You know, he struggles with some stuff, and I think at one point even Peter talks about how dumb he is.
I think he struggles with
Um,
reading like a few times in class.
yeah, I think he does. But you know, and there's this moment of really kind of like comedy with Kong early on. He was pretty funny, and then his banter with Flash, and then Flash is a much more, in a lot of ways, much more prototypical bully, but also very updated, very
Yeah.
2000s as a bully, right? He's not just, you know, hey, you puny wimp or whatever. He plays these mind games, these real mind games with other characters, and he says like some really disgusting things to
Mm.
them, like
He
things that you would never have caught them writing for Flash Thompson
no.
before.
In
You know, this was a Flash Thompson who really who says things that makes you want to cry right then, like some really hurtful, awful things. And Flash is a lot less redeemable in a lot of ways in the Ultimate Run than he is later on.
well,
And of course,
they hint
not
at some confusions maybe that are
yeah, they
happening
get
with
some
him,
confusion,
and I
and
think
then later on they reveal some things about him
yeah,
that you go, okay,
that's what I was
you
gonna
know,
say. Is part of him, like you said, he's more of like an early 2000s bully. I think when you
yeah,
think about things that were going on at the time with with bullies and with people being bullied, I think when you read Flash in these early issues and then a lot later when you think about things he might be fighting with, you kind of get the sense if I could just see what's going on at home with this guy, I think a lot of this would make sense. If I could see what he was going
yeah,
home to and what his parental situation was like or what he's battling, I think that this cruelty, because he's not quite two dimensional, not quite,
no,
he's not at all two dimensional. When people say things back to him, they hurt him. They hurt him really bad,
yeah,
and he's got these huge insecurities. That's not just he doesn't roll up and call someone Poindexter and shove him into a locker.
yeah,
He's he's battling things and he's taking out real anger and confusion.
And
It's
he's
it's
manipulative
sad.
too.
Yeah, no doubt.
He's very manipulative, right? Like, right, he talks to Kong. He's the one that says, "Hey, man, when was the last time you kicked him?" Or something like
Yeah.
that. He manipulates people, and you see other characters' reactions to it, and they're like, "What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
You guys aren't
He
funny. That's
doesn't
not
get a
funny."
pass. Everyone's not guffawing and
No,
laughing along. They're like, dude.
yeah, exactly. OG Flash Thompson, everybody's like, "Oh, Flash, you're so great. Pick on that nerd more."
All he needed was
New
the
Flash
Letterman
Thompson,
coat.
yeah. New Flash Thompson, they're just like, "You're not funny, dude. That's
Hmm.
messed up. You shouldn't treat people like that." Like, that's what they say to him.
Yep.
And, he like you say, he doesn't get a free pass. And also, he he very clearly has like a better social status than some of the other kids because his parents threatened to sue. Like, that's something
Yeah.
that's like a plot point in that first arc. So
I had
it's
forgotten about
also,
that.
he may be seeing the way that like his parents treat people and thinking, well,
Hmm.
that's how I'm supposed to act.
That's what I'm saying
And
about the at home thing. Like, he's dealing
yeah,
with some daddy something or other.
yeah, he's probably just imitating what he sees, right? He sees his
Probably.
dad treat people, like a prick. He's just like, well, that's how I get to be, where he is I act the same way. And he acts like bullies that I dealt with
Hmm.
in school at the time. Like, those are the kinds of people that tormented me, the way that Flash acts. And that's like the kind of things that I dealt with. And it's another reason why, again, I really, when I started reading it, it was the perfect time to read it because I was relating to it hard.
It's just,
Um,
it's crazy to me that you can mine this much relatability and depth. I mean, Flash Thompson, historically, not to get into any of the Venom stuff, just who he was in Amazing Spider-Man,
yeah,
is not a character that you think about what he goes home to, or you think about the way he treats people,
yeah,
or you think about, oh, he's like people in my life. Who's just a bully. And you can have these conversations pretty much with
yeah,
everyone that's introduced in this book. And
yeah,
we're just touching here on the first 7 issues. I think going forward,
yeah,
one of the joys of this series is going to be one, checking in with our people that we've already had established, because all of these guys, from Kong to May to whoever, they are all going to live their own lives independent of Peter, right? We'll always
yeah,
talk about Peter as that central character, but these guys are all moving forward too, right? High school's not stopping. The bills still need to be
yeah,
paid. But as we go, with each arc, you get 2 or 3 more guys added into this pot, right? And you keep cooking, and there are more ingredients, more flavors, and they come together and inhabit the world together so beautifully. So that when someone interacts with one of the other people, like if Kong has a conversation with May, right? It's not just like a bully and the aunt, it's Kong and May. They're
yeah.
individuals and they live in the
He,
world together.
yeah.
It's incredible character
Well,
writing. It really is.
yeah. Well, and I'll also say, um, just because we need to get to it, 2 more characters that are introduced in this arc
Yeah.
that are major, major players: Otto Octavius and Norman Osborn.
So terrifying from the jump, both of them, right? Like different kind
First
of
thing we see,
scary.
one of the first things we see Otto do is steal a blood sample from Peter.
Mhm.
It scares him to death when it happens too.
Neither of these two give a damn that he's like 15 either. These guys are
No,
like, oh, just go kill him. Just go send someone to
yeah.
drive into him on
At
his
one
way
point,
home.
Norman's like, "Kill the kid," and then
Yeah.
something happens. He dodges the car,
Pete
right?
jumps
He
over the hood of
jumps
the
over the
car.
car,
Yeah.
and Norman says, "Abort that." No, like, he's perfectly willing to eliminate him in order to avoid a lawsuit and all this other stuff. And then he goes, "Oh no, this is a good experiment. I need to analyze this person's behavior and what happens to them, and we need a blood sample." And Otto takes it, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care that it's completely like destroyed the trust that Peter has in these adults that he admired.
He doesn't care
It
that it's his son's best friend either. The fact
No,
that
he doesn't care how it affects them.
this kid is the spitting image of Harry, right? Peter and Harry don't look, act, or think too dissimilarly from one another. Obviously, the wealth has changed Harry's outlook,
Yeah,
but they're both smart. They're both athletic
yeah,
at the time that Peter is, or after Peter is bitten. They're both kind of interested in science and stuff. He could be looking at Harry. He's like, kill him,
yeah,
off him. I don't care. I've got money. I've got things I want to do with this. And it's not just the money. He's like, I want to do that to me. Like,
yeah.
I want that
I need
for
this
me.
power, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Otto's just
And
like, you know, eager to be kind of the lapdog at the time, to carry stuff out, to have proximity to these experiments that are going on, and to observe this. But he's also, you can tell from the jump, he's got his own kind of twisted machinations, right?
yeah, I
He spends a
mean,
lot of time as primary antagonist throughout the series, and they
yeah,
set him up evil, cold, heartless,
yeah.
methodical.
And I mean, also, what's Norman's line when Harry walks in on them experimenting? Will someone get this kid out of here?
Yeah, good
Not
point.
my son, not Harry, this kid. Get him out of here.
Could be a sack of potatoes, man. Nothing
Yeah,
to
it
him.
doesn't mean anything to him.
We spend a lot of time with them and get, especially, well, honestly, with both of them, a lot deeper into their brains
Yeah,
than I think we would have liked to. You get a lot more interiority of these guys.
especially as it goes on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I'll throw up right here. We're going to be talking about this ultimate number 25 at some point. You talk about interiority. You talk about getting inside the mind of these guys. But seeing them from afar before you get access to the inner workings, you know to steer clear. Right?
yeah,
This is not like this hulking beast or this I'm crazy guy. These are guys that are thinking, and they're growing and developing and gaining new skills and gaining new resources at the same rate that Peter is, right? You're going to see
yeah,
Peter start to come into money, start to come into tech, start to reevaluate what matters in like what order. Like he learns to prioritize. And once he prioritizes, he power jumps up, right? He figures out I
yeah.
can do this better. I can do this more thoughtfully. Here's the bad news. Norman and Otto are doing the same thing. And you'll
They're
go,
learning and they're growing as much as he is.
I'll tell you what, man, they're learning, they're growing, and when you spend time away from these two, it's almost as scary as when they're on screen.
Yeah,
Because we'll find this out later. Even when these guys are locked up in prison, man, they've got things in motion. They've got bad things in
yeah.
motion.
Okay. So, obviously we
Whoopsie.
look different.
Yeah, a little
Uh,
different. Outfit change.
we had some minor technical difficulties, some issues with the
All
audio,
my
and so we're
comics are
having to
gone.
re-record this last bit of
I,
our video.
I didn't
But
even notice. Look
we
at this.
promised to have these things maybe not 100% worked out, but more worked out in the future
Yeah,
for you guys.
this is a
But
test run still.
yeah, this is our first video. You know,
Bear with us.
we're still figuring out. You
Yep.
know, popping our YouTube cherry, as it were. And
I didn't say that. But yeah,
but
let's.
yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and I think launch into some final thoughts on the series. Right, we've gone over characters that we loved, ways that this was kind of indicative of the time period, what exactly was so different about Bendis's approach compared to the way that kind of revamps and reboots had been done for the character in the past. So, Tank, you want to hit us with some closing thoughts on arc one here?
yeah. So you know, it's sort of like we were saying. It's such an interesting series, right? This first arc really tackles that classic Spider-Man origin story in a brand
Mm-hmm.
new way. Bendis, I mean, you know, he stepped up to the plate. He understood the assignment and he went for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't try to change his style or to change the way that he wrote things in order to make it fit better into the Spider-Man mythos. He made it fit into his style.
Absolutely.
And you know, we talked about Bagley's art, right? We talked about how this very sleek, youthful energy artwork fits perfectly with the way that Bendis writes teenagers
Mm-hmm.
and you know this again this very young energy that they have, and well, and honestly, even in especially in the supporting characters, right?
Yeah.
Like, not just Peter, but Mary Jane and Flash and Kong and Harry, they all feel young. They feel like current.
Everything from
And
the outfits to the dialogue to the things they're concerned about, right?
yeah, absolutely. And honestly, even Ben and May, they
Yeah.
feel younger than they traditionally do.
No question. And more like their own individuals, not just extensions of Peter. Or
Exactly.
like
Well, everybody feels
devices.
like an individual.
Yeah, no question.
And here they feel more like people. They're not there to just serve a plot
Yep.
point, which is traditionally the way that, I mean, not just comics, but especially superhero fiction just in general is,
Yeah, a
right?
lot of a lot of use of like shorthand so far as supporting characters go,
Yeah,
which can be really helpful in an origin story, especially if it's one you've heard a bunch. You're like, okay,
right.
look, we get the general gist of these ideas. We know we can get straight into our story. You've got, the guardian figure, the whatever, but they didn't do that here, and the story is all the richer for it.
Yeah. Well, and also this sort of ushers in that kind of modern era of comic book
Mm-hmm.
storytelling. That sort of, it's Ultimate Spider-Man, kind of brings it in into the forefront. But after Ultimate Spider-Man, you really get not just Marvel, but even at DC, they're bringing in this sort of more like indie comic mentality to
Yeah.
things, and kind of, slowing things down and stretching them out. I mean, look at DC. You look at Crisis on Infinite Earths in '86, right? And then you look at Infinite Crisis
Yeah.
later in the early 2000s, and completely different writing styles there.
Not even getting into to Final Crisis, which is
Final
like
Crisis,
the
it kind of gets that ball rolling,
yeah,
right?
no
And
question.
and you can look at Ultimate Spider-Man and the year 2000 as when that really starts to come into play.
Yep.
There's things in the 90s, but even then, if you read a lot, especially early 90s comics, it's still got that kind of very, exposition heavy style. And Ultimate Spider-Man makes it a dialogue heavy style.
Yeah.
People are talking, people are thinking, and it's not just about like, this is happening right now and this is what I need to do. It's like, what is happening right now and
Hmm.
what do I need to do? And it's a new way of doing things, and it works, especially for a character like Spider-Man. It really works.
All that being said, also, you get all that dialogue, all that time, all the building, everything. The action is still awesome. Really kinetic.
It is.
Bagley's art is great. He's very good. We had talked about kind of the sharpness, the points, the how the characters kind of fight the way that they look. And a point that we had made the first time we did this outro that I think we both liked, that I don't want to lose, the way that Bendis and Bagley are working in tandem here, we had said it's almost like David Lynch and Angelo Badalamenti. It's like they've got that mind
Yeah.
connection where it's like this perfect symbiosis, right? These two guys in this very specific moment with this very specific mission statement just totally lockstep with each other, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a rhythm,
Yeah. And it's fun to read. It's really fun to read on.
it's very fun to read, and it's very readable too. I mean, this
Oh
is an
yeah.
arc that you can buzz right through. These 7 issues don't feel like seven
No, they
issues.
don't. And we're coming at this too. Remember, we spoke about this briefly at the beginning, but from two very different perspectives. Tank, you've had this comic with you for like most of your important years of your life. Me, I'm
Right.
brand new to it. And I had asked you last time, this pretty much holds up. Like, you don't feel the age of it the way that maybe a new reader or someone that was like, oh, I liked this when I was younger, but I don't know if I want to. To you, this was as pleasant as it ever was, right?
Yeah, honestly, it was. It, it not only as pleasant as it ever was, but it's like watching a movie
Mm,
from the early 2000s,
yeah,
right?
no question.
No question.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
feeling the same way as a new reader. Had no issues hopping in. Didn't feel the age. Still, I mean, look, 2000s are still contemporary in the grand scheme of art. This book does feel very modern and very readable. So I think
yeah.
either perspective that you're coming at this book from, never really a bad time to pick it up and dive in, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things where it still feels very current in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other ways too,
Yeah, I
right?
agree.
Because you get in Ultimate Spider-Man, and in that period, it was sort of the rise of the internet age and its effects on youth and
Mm-hmm.
adolescence. And these are things that you can feel beginning in when you read that book,
No
and
question.
things that sort of carry on to now. And so yeah, I gotta say that rereading it, I mean, yeah, no, it didn't feel like it missed a step. It didn't feel out of date. It didn't feel dated at all. And it's funny because I love the classic like early '60s Amazing Spider-Man and the
It
'70s
shows
and
its
stuff. But
age,
when I
though.
read it, it does feel dated.
No question. I think that it can. Old comics in general, like the Lee Kirby stuff, can be kind of intimidating for newcomers. I think that this book serves as a really good jumping on point for someone that wants
It
to
does.
experience a classic Spider-Man tale. I These 7 issues I would show to anyone who just wants a way into comics. Period. I think you and I had a conversation once. I asked you like Ultimate Spider-Man or like Scott Snyder's Batman. Like take one, and it's tough. It's like choosing a kid. But those two series, I think, kind of as gateway drugs, you really can't do better.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
would argue. You could also say books like Long Halloween is a
yeah,
good jumping in point. And well, it's sort of there's a lot of comics like that,
yeah.
right?
All Star
That you can
Superman.
read. All
Yeah.
Star Superman is one. Um,
As inside baseball as it gets, I would almost tell people that Jeff Johns, if you start with the Flash and Green Lantern Rebirth,
yeah.
that's a really fun way to get into the world. Of course,
Well,
that's DC, so.
another one that's sort of inside baseball. I say Immortal Hulk is another one.
Yeah. That one you can
That,
just show to a horror fan or like someone who's really heavy
yeah,
on literature or like biblical fiction, and they could be like, "Oh, I didn't know that these books could be like this." Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
I've actually been recommending Ultimate Spider-Man to friends of mine who are really big into anime and manga, but don't have a good waypoint into American comics. I think that it serves
That's
really
a good
well
one.
because it is this vast, grand storyline that you're spending time with, and
It is.
this
Yeah.
opening is exciting enough and has enough hooks and cool supporting cast and villain setups. We talked about the horror also of Green Goblin and Doc
Yeah,
Ock.
absolutely. And I mean, I would even say that was the current Mark Waid's World's Finest book is another
Yeah,
one that's a good jumping in point.
absolutely agreed. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think that
these are glowing endorsements from both of us.
yeah, absolutely. I have to say to anyone watching, if you have the Marvel app, or if you've got the spare money to pick up a paperback
Hmm.
or even an omnibus of Ultimate Spider-Man, I recommend it. I mean, it's a series worth reading.
Split the cost of the app with like a friend. Like Tank, you and
Yeah,
I, Tank covers the DC app, I cover the Marvel app, so we have everything.
yeah.
But this really is a perfect book.
Because
If
right
you're
now we're
sitting,
poor.
because we are dead broke. But if you're sitting just like waiting on like a to go order or you've got 5 minutes at work, these issues go by so fast. Um,
They do. They really do. And it's
so
such a
yeah.
good read.
Well, I
Yeah.
think with that, Tank, if you're good, we are ready to look towards our next video, our next arc in the series, which is the 6 issue learning curve story.
That's right. Peter learns as many hard lessons as he learns in our first arc. The second arc, he learns some more. And he
Mm.
also learns how to be a better Spider Man as
Mm-hmm.
well. Which is a great thing that Bendis decided to introduce in the second
Oh
arc,
yeah.
and our cast grows some more in the second arc too. We get some new characters, which we are very excited to talk about in the next video, and we continue our march towards the return of the horrifying Green Goblin and the Talk.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us here on KNC on Comics. I've been Nikki.
And I've been Tank. We'll see you next time for more Ultimate Spider-Man.